My name is Clara, and my parents are suing me for money after they abandoned me as a child. The worst part? In court, I found out I was never even their daughter to begin with. Tell me, where are you watching this from? Write it in the comments, because what I'm about to tell you is not just a story, it's a warning. They always love the sound of other people's applause. I learned that early, watching my sisters spin and sparkle in our small Ohio living room, ribbons in their hair and trophies on the fireplace mantel. "Look at Savannah," my mom would say, clapping as my sister twirled in her ballet shoes. "Such natural grace." Or, "Isn't Amelia just the brightest star?" When my other sister brought home a painting of a sun with a smiling face. And me? I folded laundry. I washed dishes no one thanked me for. I brought home report cards so perfect they practically squeaked. Straight A's, except once an A- in math. That night I'll never forget. It was a Tuesday. I had scrubbed the kitchen until the tiles gleamed. The scent of lemon cleaner hung in the air. My mother stood by the counter, beaming as she pinned Savannah's latest dance medal to the corkboard. I hovered near the doorway, paper in hand, hopeful. "An A-," she said flatly, not turning to look. "Why can't you be more like your sisters?" The words didn't sting immediately, not like a slap or a shout. They seeped in slowly like a stain. I swallowed the lump in my throat and said, "I can study more." She didn't respond, just walked past me and called for Savannah to come see her medal on the wall. That was when it clicked. Love in our house wasn't unconditional. It was performance-based. And I didn't know the choreography. Dad wasn't much different. Quiet, stern, the kind of man who expected obedience and responded to emotion like it was static on a radio. Annoying, best turned off. He once told me, "You don't get points for doing what you're supposed to." But Savannah cried after failing a test and got a day off school and ice cream. It was like there was this invisible scoreboard, and no matter how hard I tried, I was always losing. By the time I turned 10, I had learned to make myself useful, predict moods, smooth tension. I folded towels like hotel staff, cooked rice perfectly, fixed my sister's broken necklaces with tweezers and a flashlight. But praise, that was reserved for the dancers and dreamers. One night I made a pie from scratch, trying to surprise them. I used Grandma June's old recipe, lattice crust, cinnamon apples. I even cleaned the oven afterward. They didn't notice. Instead, they argued about whether Amelia should switch from art club to gymnastics. "It'll look better on college applications," my mother said. "She's only 12, my dad muttered. No one mentioned the pie. The next morning, I found half of it in the trash. I stopped baking after that. At school, teachers called me reliable. "Clara's so mature for her age," they'd say, as if that was something to celebrate. It wasn't. It was just code for, "This one doesn't cause trouble." But I did start asking quiet questions in my head. Why do I feel like a guest in my own home? Why does it feel like I have to earn every breath I take? And then came the night that changed everything. I was brushing my teeth when I overheard them in the kitchen. Low voices, my name floating in and out like static. Not like the others. "She doesn't need to know yet. Just until summer." I crept closer, heart pounding. When I stepped into the light, they froze. "Clara," my mother said, startled. "What are you doing up?" I stared at them. "Are you sending me away?" She exchanged a look with Dad, then gave me a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "Of course not, honey. Now go get some sleep." But I saw it in her face, that flicker of guilt. They weren't going to tell me. They never told me anything, but something was coming, and I felt it deep in my gut that this wasn't just about me being difficult or them needing a break. This was something bigger, and I wasn't sure I'd survive it. The morning it happened, the sky cried before I did. Rain slid down the windows in thick, steady sheets as I sat at the kitchen table, my legs swinging above the linoleum. My suitcase, blue with a fraying corner, stood by the door. I didn't pack it. My mother did. She'd called me downstairs with a clip to get ready, and when I arrived, the bag was already zipped. "Where are we going?" I asked, trying to sound casual. My chest felt tight. "We're taking a little trip," she said, not meeting my eyes. Dad drank his coffee in silence. No newspaper, no goodbye glance, just the sound of the rain and the clink of his spoon against the mug. I climbed into the backseat of the car, my backpack on my lap. No one played the radio. We drove through Ohio's back roads in silence, the trees blurring into gray-green smudges. The farther we went, the more I knew. This wasn't a trip. This was a drop-off. Eventually, I saw the sign, "Welcome to Kansas." That was the first time I cried. "Why am I going to Grandma June's?" I asked, voice shaky. "For how long?" Mom turned around in the passenger seat, that same tight smile she wore when strangers complimented her kids in grocery stores. "Just for a little while, Clara. It'll be good for you. A change of pace." A little while has a cruel elasticity, doesn't it? When we pulled into Grandma June's driveway, she was already on the porch, her silver hair tucked neatly under a scarf, a soft smile on her face that somehow didn't match the tension in my parents' posture. She came down the steps as I stepped out, rain misting my cheeks. I ran to her. She hugged me so tightly I almost believed this was normal. "I made your favorite chicken and dumplings," she said. Her voice was warm, like a blanket fresh from the dryer. Behind me, I heard the car trunk slam. "We can't stay," Mom said. "Quick trip," Dad added, already climbing back into the car. My backpack was still in the trunk. They didn't get it out. "Wait." I ran after them, confused panic bubbling up. Aren't you coming inside?" But they didn't even roll down the window. The engine revved, tires splashed against the wet gravel, and just like that, they were gone. I stood in the rain, heart pounding in my ears, the only sound louder than the retreating car. I stared at the road long after the taillights disappeared. Behind me, Grandma June touched my shoulder gently. "Come on in, sweetheart. Let's get you warm." Her house smelled like vanilla and thyme. The kind of place where clocks tick softly and nothing is ever slammed. She poured me cocoa, handed me a dry sweater, and didn't ask me to explain the tears streaming silently down my face. That night, she tucked me into bed and kissed my forehead. "They said it would be a few weeks," I whispered, still holding on to the thread of hope. She brushed my hair back with trembling fingers. "Clara, sometimes people don't know how to love the right way, but you are loved, fully, no conditions." I didn't understand all of it then, but I remembered it. Those words became the first bricks of a foundation I would one day stand on. At school the next week, I introduced myself as Clara Reynolds, the quiet new girl from Ohio. I didn't say abandoned. I didn't say left. But I knew. And every time the phone didn't ring, every birthday card that never came, it got clearer. They weren't coming back. Grandma June didn't hover. She didn't pepper me with questions I wasn't ready to answer, or make excuses for people who had peeled away from my life like the last leaves of October. Instead, she taught me how to plant roses. It started that first spring in Kansas. We stood side by side in the garden out back, kneeling in the dirt. She handed me a pair of gloves and a small spade. The soil smelled sweet and wet. "You dig the hole," she said. "I'll do the roots." The bush was scraggly, half alive. "This thing won't bloom," I muttered, brushing dirt from my knee. "Give it time," she said simply. "The most stubborn roots sometimes grow the most beautiful things." We planted 4 that day, 2 yellow, 1 soft pink, and 1 deep crimson. She named them without asking: Patience, Grace, Mercy, and Wildfire. That was Grandma. At school, I became the quiet kid who always had her homework done early. I didn't raise my hand unless I had to. But teachers liked me, and I liked disappearing in books. Grandma June let me take over a little sunroom that faced the garden. She bought a second-hand desk from a garage sale and painted it pale blue. We filled the shelves with old paperbacks and National Geographics from the library thrift cart. I found peace there, in the click of my pen, the soft scratch of pages turning, the rustle of roses in the wind. Sometimes I'd wake to the sound of her humming in the kitchen, cinnamon rolls already rising, coffee percolating. That's how I learned safety. Not through grand declarations, but in the rhythm of someone choosing to show up every single day. When I turned 14, she showed up in another way. I came home from school to find her at the dining table, bills and letters spread across the surface. She looked up and smiled. "We need to talk about your future." I hesitated. "Did something happen?" "No, honey," she said gently. "But I want you to know I've been saving. I know you'll want to go to college." I sat down slowly. "But isn't that expensive?" She reached across and squeezed my hand. "We'll figure it out. You're smart, Clara. You've got more potential in your little finger than most folks carry their whole lives. I don't want anything holding you back." I didn't cry then, but I remembered the way her voice shook a little when she said it. Like she knew what she was giving up to give me something more. I studied harder than ever after that. Stayed late at school. Joined the math club, the science fair. By 16, I had enough volunteer hours to make a college admissions officer blink. I still didn't believe I'd make it in, not really. Not with our income. But I applied to a state university anyway. The acceptance letter came in a slim envelope. I was too scared to open it. Grandma June did it for me. Her eyes scanned the page, then filled with tears. She didn't speak at first, just handed me the letter and said, "You're going." I stared at the tuition numbers at the bottom. "I can't afford this." Her eyes met mine. "I can." I found out later she'd cashed out part of her retirement, told no one. She did it quietly, without fuss or martyrdom. "You're not a burden," she told me when I tried to argue. "You're my heart. That's the cost of dreams, Clara. Let me help you fly." That was the day I decided I'd pay her back somehow. I didn't know how long it would take, but I would. Because I finally understood what real love looked like. Not loud, not boastful, not wrapped in conditions. Just present, every day. Planting roots where others had only left holes. The morning of my college graduation, the sky split wide with sunlight. It hadn't rained in days, but the grass on campus still smelled fresh, and the breeze carried just enough warmth to feel like a promise. Grandma June sat in the third row of the folding chair section, wearing a wide-brimmed hat and a lavender dress I had never seen before. She waved when I walked across the stage. Not like a proud parent might, wild and attention-seeking, but with a small, steady wave. Eyes glistening. Lips pressed into the kind of smile that's half joy, half quiet disbelief. I wanted to run to her before the diploma was even in my hand. Afterward, she found me by the fountain. "You made everything real," I whispered, hugging her so tightly the edge of my cap dug into her shoulder. She pulled back just enough to look at me. "No, baby, you did. I just held the ladder while you climbed." We took a picture together right then, just the two of us, no applause in the background, no family crowding the frame. That photo sits on my desk even now, and I swear her eyes still sparkle in it. 2 weeks later, I got the job, Denver, tech startup, junior systems analyst. I didn't even know what half the role would involve, but I said yes so fast I forgot to breathe. The apartment I rented was barely big enough for a yoga mat, and the kitchen light flickered when I opened the fridge, but it was mine. That first night, I sat cross-legged on the floor with a bowl of instant noodles, called Grandma June, and told her, "I think I'm becoming somebody." She laughed. "You always were." At work, I said yes to everything. Early projects, extra hours, weekend fixes. I learned fast, climbed faster. Within a year, I was leading a team of 5. The pace didn't scare me, it grounded me. I knew what it felt like to have nothing secure, so I built stability brick by brick. And with my second promotion came something else, enough money to start sending a check home each month. Not to my parents, not to the place that forgot me, to Grandma June. I never called it paying her back. She would have refused. Instead, I said it was for the garden or a porch repaint or fresh paint for the kitchen. She always played along, always wrote thank you cards signed with little jokes. "Tell your boss I said give you a raise, the roses are hungry. You're my favorite landlord even though I own the house." But I knew she never cashed most of the checks. I found them once tucked into a cookie tin behind the flour jar during a visit. She was saving them. "Why?" I asked her. "In case you need them," she said. "But I don't," I told her. "Not anymore." She just smiled and passed me a biscuit. The cottage stayed the same, chipped paint, uneven porch steps, those same 4 rose bushes blooming bigger each year. I visited every other month, no matter how busy work got. It was the only place that ever felt like home meant something good. One autumn weekend, I surprised her with new appliances. She scolded me lovingly, saying her old stove still worked fine. "You have to turn it on with a screwdriver," I pointed out. "It builds character," she countered. We laughed until we cried. There were moments I thought about inviting her to live with me in Denver. But I knew she wouldn't. She loved her space, her routines, the slow morning walks to the corner bakery, her neighbor Betsy, who brought over fig jam in reused pickled jars. She was the town's unofficial advice dispenser. People came by just to sit on the porch and sip sweet tea while she listened. "She should have been a therapist," I told my coworker once. Sounds like she already is, he said. The years passed with a steady kind of magic. I was 30 by the time I realized I hadn't thought about my parents in months. Their absence no longer a wound but a healed-over scar, occasionally tender, never reopened. And in all that time, Grandma June never mentioned them. Not once. Not even when old photos resurfaced or her church sent holiday cards addressed to the Reynolds family. She just gave me that same look every time, as if to say, "You are enough, you've always been enough." The last time I spoke to Grandma June, she told me the roses were blooming out of season. "Wildfire's showing off," she said over the phone, her voice a little raspier than usual. "I think she knows something's coming." I laughed gently, curled up on my Denver couch with a spreadsheet open on my laptop. "Tell her I'm proud of her." "She misses you," she said. "I'll come next weekend." But she didn't wait that long. It happened on a Tuesday, silent, swift, the kind of exit she might have planned if she'd had the choice. A neighbor found her asleep in the porch rocking chair, arms folded, blanket tucked neatly around her knees. The sun had barely risen. She was still holding her tea. The call came from Betsy, her voice trembling, broken. I remember setting my laptop down and walking outside barefoot, the cold cement numbing the panic in my chest. I don't remember what I said. Just the wind brushing against my face and the weight, so heavy and sudden, I thought I might fold in half. That week I became a machine, booked flights, called the funeral home, spoke to the minister she liked, the one who wore jeans to Sunday service and quoted poetry in his sermons. I handled every detail, down to the font on the programs. June Marlene Reynolds, 1935-2022. Beloved grandmother. Unconditional giver. No one from my family showed up. Not Savannah, not Amelia, not the parents who left me on her porch and drove away. I emailed them. Not because I wanted them there, but because I knew she would have wanted me to try. I never got a reply. The hearse never arrived either. They sent the wrong car. A logistics error, the funeral director said. Just one more small insult, accidental or not, so I drove her myself. Me in the driver's seat, her ashes in the passenger seat. The same road she once took me down when I was 10 and tear-streaked, clutching a suitcase too big for my small frame. I stood alone at the gravesite, clutching the folded linen she always kept in her apron pocket. The minister spoke kindly. The roses from our garden were laid carefully on the table beside her urn. But the silence around me was thunderous. No family, no old friends. Just the sound of wind in the trees and a few sympathetic looks from townsfolk who barely knew her but still showed up. I said nothing at first. Just placed my hand on the urn and whispered, "Thank you." That night, I returned to her house. Empty now, too quiet. I made tea out of muscle memory, tucked a blanket over the arm of the couch, walked into each room with the quiet dread of knowing no voice would call from the hallway, "You all right, baby?" In her room, I found a note tucked beneath her jewelry box, written in that delicate, looping handwriting. "If you're reading this, you know I loved you like you were mine, because you always were. I'm not worried about you, Clara. You've always known how to find your own way. But please promise me one thing, don't let them take what we built. You earned your peace, keep it." I read it 3 times, then sat on her bed and cried for the first time since the call. Not sobs, not rage. Just quiet, unstoppable tears for a woman who loved me past blood, past reason, past the boundaries of obligation. And maybe part of me cried because I knew deep down I had no one left who loved me like that. I buried my face in her pillow. It still smelled like lavender. For hours that night, I stayed there, watching the ceiling, listening for sounds that wouldn't come. Alone in that house, I felt the weight of it all. Not just the grief, but the loneliness that had threaded itself through my life in quieter ways. Because no matter how successful I'd become, no matter how fiercely independent, there was always a child inside me still waiting for someone to choose her, stay with her, fight for her. Grandma June had. And now it was just me. The day after the funeral, I woke before sunrise. The house felt hollow in a way that didn't quite fit its size. I wandered from room to room, touching the backs of chairs, brushing my fingers along picture frames, pausing at the stove where she used to hum while stirring gravy. Everything was familiar, but without her, it all felt oddly misplaced, like the soul of the home had stepped out for a moment but forgot to return. I knew grief could turn walls into echoes, but I didn't expect it to make me feel like a guest again. A 10-year-old girl with a too big suitcase, not sure where she belonged. By mid-morning, I stood in the garden with a mug of cold coffee. The roses were still blooming, wildly, defiantly. Wildfire glowed crimson. Grace had new buds. Patience leaned toward the sun as if searching for guidance. "Okay," I whispered to them, "I guess it's our turn now." That was the moment I made the decision. I wasn't leaving Kansas. Not right away, not until this place felt like it could breathe again. The cottage had been quiet for too long. It needed hands. It needed noise. It needed me. I started with the roof, mostly because I could hear it groaning during windstorms. I hired a local contractor, a cheerful woman named Madison, no relation, who brought a crew that hammered from dawn to dusk. I stayed outside the whole time, hauling boards, sweeping nails, pretending I knew what flashing was. Next came the porch. The wood was soft in the corners, splintered where the rocking chair used to sit. When Madison's crew pulled up a rotten plank, we found a family of spiders. I politely asked them to rehome somewhere far, far away. Inside, I painted the kitchen walls sage green, the same shade as Grandma June's favorite apron. I left tiny handprints of paint on the doorknobs, and one long streak on my forearm I didn't notice until bedtime. I framed her old letters, the ones she used to tuck into my suitcases whenever I visited during college. Some were full of jokes about Rose's misbehaving. Others were simple reminders. "I'm proud of you. Be gentle with yourself." I hung them in the hallway like a gallery. Each time I walked by, it felt like she was whispering encouragement over my shoulder. As the weeks passed, neighbors stopped by, often under the disguise of delivering casseroles or asking if I needed a ladder. But really, they were checking on me. The way people do in small towns, softly, without forcing their way in. It was comforting, in a shy sort of way. One afternoon, I found myself on the porch steps eating a peach from the farmer's market. The sun was warm. The roses were humming with bees. A breeze brushed my cheek, lifting my hair just the way her hand once did. For the first time since she passed, I didn't feel hollow. I felt rooted. I began working remotely more often, setting up a workspace in the sunroom she'd helped me paint years ago. Every morning, light spilled over the desk and washed the keyboard in gold. I'd sit there answering emails while birds built nests in the oak tree outside, and something quiet inside me began to mend. Some nights, I walked the property line she'd once walked with me, pointing out trees by name, telling stories about winters where the snow came up to the windowsills. I talked to her out loud sometimes, ridiculous things like complaining about a glitchy work app or telling her dinner was a disaster because I burned the garlic again. If anyone heard me, they never said a word. Month by month, the cottage came back to life. The roof stopped groaning. The porch held firm. The kitchen glowed. The roses grew so wild they climbed the fence like they were reaching for something beyond the yard. And slowly, painfully, beautifully, I grew too. The loneliness didn't vanish. It softened. It stopped being sharp enough to cut. Instead, it rested somewhere deep, like a weight I could carry without stumbling. For the first time in my life, I wasn't trying to earn anyone's approval. I wasn't trying to be chosen. I had chosen myself. I had chosen this home, this peace. This place where love had lived so fully, it left an imprint on every floorboard. And as the days stretched into seasons, I realized something simple but powerful. I wasn't alone here. Not really. Not ever. The knock came on a Saturday. It was the kind of day that had started soft, sunlight slanting through the curtains, biscuits rising in the oven, the familiar hum of weekend stillness that had become my favorite part of small-town life. I was barefoot, coffee in hand, halfway through repainting a picture frame when I heard it. 3 firm knocks. Not the lazy tap of a neighbor, not a package drop. I froze. Something in me already knew. When I opened the door, the past stood there in dress shoes and fake smiles. My parents, my sisters, Savannah in oversized sunglasses, Amelia with freshly curled hair. Mom clutched her purse like it might bolt from her hands. Dad looked around like he was scanning for property lines. "Clara," Mom said, arms half lifted like she expected a hug or maybe hoped I'd offer one first. I didn't move. "What are you doing here?" Dad answered, stepping forward slightly. We were in the area, thought we'd drop by. In Kansas. Savannah laughed lightly, like it was cute. We figured you'd want to catch up. It's been years. I hadn't seen any of them since I was 10. The last words they said to me were, "You'll be fine, Clara," before pulling away in a rain-soaked car. Right, I said slowly, gripping the doorframe. We were so sorry to hear about June, Mom added, glancing behind me like she expected to see a funeral in progress. She was a kind woman. She raised me, I said. So yes, she was. An awkward silence bloomed between us. Savannah peered past my shoulder. You've done well for yourself. This place is cute. Amelia chimed in, stepping onto the porch uninvited. Is this the same cottage Grandma used to live in? You kept it nice. Must have taken some work. I stepped in front of the door fully. What do you want? Mom blinked. Clara, there's no need to be hostile. You left me. That was years ago, she said, brushing a strand of hair behind her ear. We all make hard decisions. Dad cleared his throat. Look at you. You turned out fine. It was like they expected applause for that. I didn't turn out fine because of you. We're not here to argue, Mom said, her voice dipping into that performative softness she used with church friends and real estate clients. We just wanted to reconnect, maybe make amends. I narrowed my eyes. You've had years, why now? Another pause. This time it was Dad who stepped forward, slow and careful like he was about to deliver good news. Well, you're doing well now. Good job, fixed up the house. We thought maybe it was time to talk about. You're not getting money from me, I said flatly. Amelia gasped. We didn't say that. You didn't have to. Savannah folded her arms. So what, you're just cutting us off forever? We're family. I laughed once. It came out sharper than I meant. You're not family, not in any way that counts. Mom stiffened. Clara, don't be dramatic. I was 10. You dropped me off like luggage and never came back. You didn't call. You didn't write. June died and none of you even sent a card. And now you show up sniffing around the property like it owes you something. We raised you, Dad snapped suddenly. Fed you, housed you. For how long? I shot back. 10 years, 8, 7. They didn't answer. I opened the door wider, not to invite them in, but to make a point. Whatever brought you here, you can take it with you. I owe you nothing. This home is mine. Everything I built without you. Savannah rolled her eyes. Unbelievable. You know what's unbelievable? I said, my voice steady now, that you think you can walk back in like nothing happened. Mom's face hardened. You'll regret this. I already have for years, but not anymore. I stepped back inside. Please leave. For a moment, no one moved. Then slowly, first Dad, then Mom, they turned. Savannah and Amelia followed, still muttering under their breath. They walked back to a sleek SUV parked under my maple tree, tires crunching softly against the gravel as they pulled away. I closed the door and leaned against it. And for the first time in a long time, I didn't feel like a little girl hoping someone would stay. I had made them leave. On my terms. The envelope looked harmless. It was thin, cream-colored, tucked neatly between my electric bill and a grocery store coupon flyer. I almost didn't notice it, until I saw the embossed seal in the corner. Reynolds and Hartman Family Law. My hands went cold. I set the rest of the mail on the counter and stared at the envelope like it might hiss if I touched it again. Just 2 days earlier, my parents had stood on my porch thanking the wind for the view and pretending they wanted a relationship. Now they were sending me legal documents. I slid my finger under the seal. The paper inside was stiff, professional, and smelled faintly of printer ink. My name in bold at the top. Petition for filial support. I blinked. Once, twice. My chest tightened as I read the first lines, each word hammering harder than the last. The petitioners, Robert and Melissa Reynolds, hereby seek financial support. Defendant has neglected parental duty, failure to provide care, neglect. I sank onto the nearest chair. My throat felt thick, like I'd swallowed something sharp. By the third paragraph, my vision blurred. They were demanding alimony. From me. I read it again, slower this time, hoping it would make more sense. It didn't. They claimed they were struggling financially. They claimed I'd become financially advantaged and therefore had a filial obligation to assist them in maintaining a reasonable standard of living. They even included my sisters as secondary beneficiaries. I let out a disbelieving laugh, short, bitter, cracked at the edges. The kitchen felt too small for my breathing. The walls felt closer. The hum of the fridge sounded like static. I picked up my phone and dialed the only person I trusted not to lie to me about any of it. Dana. She was the first lawyer I'd ever hired, sharp-minded, straight-talking, a woman in her 40s who had once won a case by proving a man lied based on the way he touched his nose during testimony. She picked up on the second ring. "Clara, everything okay?" "No," I said, because this wasn't the kind of thing you tiptoe around. "I got served." A rustle on her end, a pause. "Tell me what it says." I scanned the page, reading the phrases out loud. "They're claiming I owe them alimony under a filial responsibility clause." Dana exhaled long enough that I could picture her rubbing her temples. "Kansas does technically have one." The room swayed slightly. "What does that mean?" "It means," she said carefully, "there's an old law on the books that allows parents to seek support from adult children. It isn't used often, but it exists." Support, as if they had ever supported me. "So they can actually do this." My voice cracked on the last word. Humiliating, but I didn't care. "Not necessarily," she said firmly. "A judge has to approve the claim, and abandonment, neglect, or failure to provide care when you were a minor can completely invalidate it." I let out a shaky breath. "They abandoned me." "I know, but they're banking on the technicality surviving until court. This is pressure, Clara, manipulation wrapped in legal language." My hands trembled as I pressed the papers flat on the table. "Why now?" Dana didn't hesitate. "Because they realized you won't give them what they want voluntarily." I thought of the way Dad's eyes had darted toward the new porch boards, the way Mom had run her hand along the kitchen counter like evaluating property, the way Savannah had whispered, "She's doing well, isn't she?" as if I wasn't standing right there. "They're using the law to take from me," I whispered. "They're trying," Dana corrected, "but they won't get away with it. I'll file a response, and I'll need your childhood details, everything you remember." I swallowed hard. "That's not easy." "I know," she said, her voice softer now. "But this is your defense. You didn't neglect them. They neglected you." My gaze drifted to the window. The roses outside swayed gently in the wind, oblivious to the storm beginning in my chest. "What happens next?" I asked. "We go to trial," she said, "and we show the truth." My fingers tightened around the edge of the table. I could still hear my mother's last words on my porch, "You'll regret this." It was as if she'd meant it literally. "Clara," Dana added gently, "I promise you they don't get to rewrite history just because you built a life without them." I closed my eyes. For the first time in years, I felt that old heaviness I thought I'd buried under college degrees and job promotions and fresh paint in the kitchen. The heaviness of being unwanted and then suddenly useful. A resource, a target. "I won't let them take my home," I said quietly. Dana's voice sharpened. "Good, then we fight." I hung up and let the silence fill the house. The envelope lay open on the table, the petition staring up at me like a dare. My family hadn't come back for me. They came back for what they believed I owed them. And I would have to prove, legally, that I didn't owe them anything at all. The courthouse was smaller than I imagined. It sat 2 blocks off Main Street, a pale sandstone building with narrow windows and ivy climbing up one side like it was trying to pull the place back into the ground. I parked across the street and sat in my car for 5 full minutes, watching people come and go through the front doors. I didn't see them yet, my family, but I knew they were inside. The file folder on my passenger seat felt heavier than it should have. Inside were Dana's notes, copies of the petition, and a photo of me at age 10, standing on Grandma June's porch with a half-packed suitcase and eyes too wide for my face. I'd chosen that photo myself. Dana said if the trial came down to whose truth sounded more human, I needed to remind the judge who I'd been before I learned how to protect myself. I adjusted the collar of my beige suit. It was the first time in years I'd worn something so formal. The fabric itched around the seams, but I liked how grounded it made me feel, like armor stitched from calm and control. "You ready?" Dana's voice buzzed through my phone speaker. I picked it up with a steady hand. "Already here." "Good, I'm in conference room 2B, come find me when you walk in." I took a deep breath. "Are they?" "They're here early, actually." Of course they were. I crossed the street slowly, each step more deliberate than the last. My heels clicked against the stone steps. I tried not to look around too much, didn't want to give them the satisfaction if they were watching. Inside, the air was colder, cleaner. It smelled like paper and polish, and the walls echoed every footstep with a kind of hollow importance. The clerk at the desk directed me toward the courtroom. As I walked down the corridor, I passed a row of waiting benches. That's where I saw them. My parents, my sisters, all of them dressed for sympathy. Dad in a blazer I'd never seen him wear. Mom in pearls. Savannah pretending to scroll through her phone, Amelia flipping absently through a manila folder like she had business here. They saw me. Savannah smiled, not warmly, not nervously, smugly, like she thought she already knew how today would end. "Clara," Mom said brightly, standing up. "You look very professional." I didn't stop walking. "Nice to see you again," Dad added, tone flat. Still, I kept walking. It wasn't until I reached the courtroom door that I allowed myself a breath. Dana was already inside, talking with her assistant. She looked up as I entered and nodded. "You okay?" I nodded, but my voice came out low. "They're really going through with this. They think you'll flinch." I set the folder on the table and took my seat. 10 minutes later, the bailiff opened the doors, and in came the family I hadn't chosen. They walked in with stiff spines and confident steps, like actors arriving on stage, certain of their lines. They didn't look at me as they passed. Not directly. They didn't have to. Their silence said everything. The courtroom was modest, rows of wooden benches, a judge's bench that loomed just enough to demand respect. The state seal hung above her seat, and beside it the clock ticked loudly like a heartbeat. Dana leaned in. "No surprises today. Opening statements, document submission. We're laying the groundwork." I nodded, but my palms were already damp. I pressed them into my lap and straightened my back. The judge entered a few minutes later, gray hair pulled back, a stern gaze scanning the room before she even spoke. "Court is now in session." My parents sat directly across from me, calm and composed. It was surreal, watching them sit there like they belonged, like they were owed something, as if I were a rebellious daughter being called to account. But I wasn't rebelling. I was defending my life. And the courtroom, this strange, quiet battlefield, was where I'd have to prove that everything they claimed was built on sand. I didn't think I could be surprised anymore. Not after the lawsuit. Not after the knock on my door. Not after the years of silence they'd packaged into this sudden claim of family loyalty. But when my mother took the stand and started to cry, real tears or maybe very good ones, I felt a strange heat crawl up my neck. Pity. No. Embarrassment. Possibly, but mostly it was rage, controlled, leashed, but burning quietly. "She was always distant," Mom said to the judge, dabbing at her eyes with a tissue. "From a very young age, Clara had trouble connecting with the family." I blinked. Trouble connecting. "She spent most of her time alone. We did what we could. Counseling, extra attention, but she preferred isolation." A script. It was obvious she'd rehearsed it. Her tone was too measured, her pauses too convenient. Dad followed her, somber and authoritative. He spoke about years of sacrifice, about struggles during the recession, and how they still managed to provide shelter and food. "For how long?" Dana asked during cross-examination. Dad straightened. "Until she was sent to live with her grandmother, temporarily." "Sent," Dana echoed. "Or left," he faltered. "We agreed it would be best for everyone." "Did you send financial support during that time?" "We were emotionally supportive." Dana raised an eyebrow, but not financially. "She had everything she needed." Dana nodded slowly, "because someone else provided it." The judge took notes with slow, deliberate strokes. Next, Savannah and Amelia were called not as witnesses but as supporting statements. Amelia twirled a ring on her finger and sighed deeply. "Clara's always been distant." "Distant," Dana repeated, "or left behind." "She had June, that was her choice." I stiffened. That was a lie. I never chose to be left. I chose to survive after it happened. Dana's final move before resting was submitting documentation. Old letters, testimonies from neighbors, photos of me at various milestones, none of which featured my parents. Still, I felt uneasy. They had twisted absence into victimhood, turned my success into ammunition, framed my independence as neglect. Then the doors burst open. Dana turned her head sharply. Her assistant, Sam, strode in, breathless, holding a thick manila envelope like it was radioactive. He rushed to the table, whispering something into Dana's ear. Her expression didn't change. She simply nodded once, then rose. "Your Honor," Dana said, voice calm but cutting through the air like a blade. "We'd like to submit a newly recovered document from the State Archive in Ohio. It concerns Clara Reynolds' guardianship." The judge glanced down at her bench. "You may proceed." Dana opened the file, pulled out a photocopy, and handed it to the clerk. "This is a legal record indicating that Robert and Melissa Reynolds surrendered all custodial rights to Clara when she was 10 years old." A pause fell over the room. Dana continued. "According to this document, signed and notarized, Clara was placed in the full care of June Reynolds, her maternal grandmother. No support payments followed. No attempt to reverse guardianship. No visitation. No custody filings." The judge adjusted her glasses, reading silently. My mother's face drained of color. Dad shifted in his seat. "They abandoned her," Dana said, voice unwavering. "And now they're seeking retroactive compensation for a child they legally and willfully relinquished." The silence in the courtroom was no longer awkward. It was electric. The judge looked up slowly. "I need time to review this document in detail," she said, eyes flicking between the parties. "But I will say this much, this changes the character of the case considerably." She stood. "Court will recess until tomorrow." The gavel struck once. Everyone rose. As I turned to gather my things, I caught a glimpse of my mother's expression, not tearful now, not composed, cornered. Outside, I stepped into the sun and finally let my breath go. This wasn't over, but something had shifted, and they knew it. The courtroom was even quieter the next day. No coughs, no whispers. Just the faint sound of a page turning now, and then as the judge reviewed her notes. I sat at the same table, hands folded tightly in my lap. Dana beside me, calm and focused. Across the aisle, my parents looked smaller than before. Savannah scrolled nervously through her phone until Mom hissed something under her breath and she set it down. The judge adjusted her robe and cleared her throat. "In reviewing the evidence presented," she began, "this court finds several notable discrepancies between the plaintiff's claims and the legal record." She lifted the Ohio file. The one Dana's assistant had rushed in like a live wire, and tapped it once. "Robert and Melissa Reynolds voluntarily transferred full custody of Clara Reynolds to June Marlene Reynolds in the year Clara turned 10. That custody was not contested. There is no record of continued guardianship, financial support, or attempted reunification." My stomach knotted. The judge's voice was even, not cruel, not sympathetic, just final. "This court does not find a credible foundation for the plaintiff's claim of abandonment or neglect by the defendant. Rather, the record indicates that it was the plaintiffs who relinquished responsibility." Dana's hand gently brushed my wrist, just a touch, not for comfort, but for steadiness. The judge continued. "Furthermore, this case appears to leverage a rarely used clause under Kansas law, intended to support vulnerable parents, not to enable exploitation. It is this court's opinion that the plaintiff's motivations are not based in hardship, but in opportunism." Dad flinched. Mom said nothing. "Given the legal history and the facts established, I am dismissing the claim in its entirety." A weight I didn't realize I'd been holding began to lift. So slowly, it felt like my spine had to relearn how to rise. But the judge wasn't finished. "There is also concern about the plaintiff's submission of misleading character testimony and the omission of their custodial history in the original petition. This court finds those actions to be in bad faith." She looked at them then, directly. No robes, no formality. Just the human gaze of someone who saw exactly what they were trying to do. "Accordingly, I am issuing a financial penalty for filing a frivolous claim and for attempting to manipulate the court. Additional action may be pursued by the district attorney if deemed necessary." Mom's mouth opened, closed, Dad's hands clenched on the bench, and then came the final blow. "Your request for financial support is denied. Your conduct is noted. You are dismissed." The gavel fell. One solid, echoing strike. I stayed seated. Across the aisle, my parents didn't move at first. Then slowly, they gathered their papers, their pride, and what was left of their entitlement. Savannah led the way out, heels clicking louder than they needed to. Amelia followed, eyes burning. My mother didn't look at me. My father paused at the door like he might say something, then thought better of it. As they disappeared down the hallway, two plainclothes officers approached them. Calm, professional. I didn't hear what they said, but I saw the stiffness in my parents' shoulders, the way Mom's hand flew to her chest, the way Dad argued, then stopped cold when a second officer showed a printed form. Dana leaned in. Fraud claim, filing false statements in court, the judge escalated. Outside, I stood in the sun again, this time not waiting, not hiding. And when Dana joined me, I turned and asked, was I too harsh? She tilted her head. You were polite, the law was harsh, and it needed to be. I nodded slowly, eyes stinging. All these years, I'd wanted something from them, a reason, a truth, even an apology. But what I really needed was to say no, and have it mean something. 3 weeks later, we met one last time. It wasn't in a courtroom, just a conference room in a quiet law office, all neutral colors and humming air vents. A long table, 2 pitchers of water, folders lined up like soldiers. I arrived early. Dana sat beside me, serene as ever, tapping her pen lightly against her notes. Across from us sat another attorney, one hired by my parents after the ruling. This meeting wasn't about litigation. It was about closure. Boundaries spelled out in legal language, signed and sealed. My parents entered last. No dramatic entrances this time. No pearls, no performances, just plain clothes and lowered eyes. Amelia and Savannah didn't come. Mom nodded slightly. Dad looked everywhere but at me. The other attorney began. We're here today to finalize the stipulations concerning future contact, financial interaction, and public conduct between both parties. Dana spoke next, her voice cool and steady. My client has requested that these boundaries be made legally binding through mutual agreement. She slid the document across the table. Clause by clause, it was read aloud. No financial contact or claims. No public statements implying relationship or responsibility. No future lawsuits. No unsanctioned visits. And most importantly, complete legal recognition that I had no remaining filial obligation to either of them. They signed. Not immediately. Not without the faintest flicker of hesitation. But they signed. Mom reached for her pen with a quiet sigh. Dad pressed harder than necessary, the pen tip nearly tearing the paper. Their attorney nodded in acknowledgement. Dana collected the documents and closed her folder with finality. Then we're finished here. No one stood. For a moment, the room just held silence. Not tense, not angry, just final. I met my mother's eyes. She looked tired, not defiant, not cruel. Just a woman who'd finally run out of stories to tell herself. I didn't speak. There was nothing left to say. When they left, I didn't watch them go. I just reached for the glass of water in front of me and took a sip. It tasted clean, like something had finally been washed away. I didn't know what to do with the quiet at first. After everything, the lawsuit, the trial, the final meeting, it was like the house exhaled and left me standing in its breath. For days, I moved from room to room, not quite sure what to fix, what to clean, what to make of the stillness. I wasn't afraid of it anymore, just unfamiliar with peace. Then one morning, I walked into Grandma June's sewing room. It had sat untouched since she passed, dust on the windowsill, a spool of thread still caught in the machine. That's where I found the notebook. It was tucked between fabric swatches, worn at the edges. Inside, in her looping, careful handwriting, were names. Dozens of them. Women from town. Girls she'd mentored. Single mothers she'd brought groceries to in secret. High schoolers she helped apply for scholarships. Stories I'd never heard but somehow already knew. At the bottom of the page, she'd written one quiet line, "What we plant grows beyond us." I cried for a long time after that. Then I made a decision. I called Dana. I called the local community center. I called June's old church, her library club, the women she used to bake with, and I started something. The June Reynolds Foundation began small, just a website, a few outreach emails, a draft mission statement scribbled on my porch. But word spread quickly in the town that had loved her. Donations came in from unexpected places. Former students, neighbors, women she'd helped and never bragged about. We set up a scholarship fund. Then a mentorship program for girls aging out of foster care. Within months, we had a local space. A room above the library with donated books, a computer, a bulletin board with job postings and gentle encouragements. Every inch of it whispered her. Sometimes I sit in the garden with my laptop and answer emails from women asking for help, advice, direction. And I look up at the roses, wild as ever, climbing, thriving, and I think, you'd love this, Grandma. You'd see what you started. You'd see how love, when it's given freely, multiplies in quiet, defiant ways. You'd see me, not because I finally became someone worth seeing, but because I always was.